Hi, and welcome back. You've just tuned in to the Life Sciences PLM Innovation Forum 2021. We've reached to the first subtopic of the day, which is actually sparking innovation. So we have some really interesting speakers lined up for you who are going to cover the topic sparking innovation from different angles. And the first speaker up is Gunnar Storfeldt. Really happy to have him on stage. He's going to talk about systematic innovation management and also about why innovation initiatives plummet and how you can overcome those challenges. So Gunnar, thanks a lot for being here and welcome on stage.
My pleasure, Rehan, and thank you for inviting me. I am Gunnar Storfeldt. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Amplify, and I'm also a senior innovation strategist. And this is systematic innovation management, the principles for achieving sustainable innovation performance. And in innovation management is a really difficult discipline. Most organizations would like to be innovative, but they're struggling with the results. There's a lot of disappointment, a lot of waste of resources and efforts and engagement because you're not reaching what you expect. And at Amplify, we are a consultancy and academy 100% focused on innovation and its management. And we've done that for over 20 years now. We have a great vision, the vision that everyone can renew themselves, their organizations and their societies. It's a grand vision, and our mission and our contribution to that is to professionalize the discipline of innovation management, which means that we manage innovation proactively and systematically on all levels. On the strategical level, on the tactical level, and the operational level, just as you would expect to do when it comes to any mission-critical business activity. Now, we've done this for a long time, and we've done it internationally across a range of different sectors and industries. Now, these are just a few of the life science clients that we worked with over the years. And I would say that the need for increasing the innovation capability and the innovation performance is universal. But as we said, one of the main issues is that we are struggling with achieving good results, which means that you're not willing to take the risk again and reinvest in innovation efforts. So what does that come down to? What are the basic reasons for this? There are many factors, of course, but we have a few key ones that I would like to talk about. An innovation initiatives or effort often starts from the top. There's a desire to be at the forefront, leading, shaping the industry. And for that, you need to be innovative. So you often see a call out from management saying that we need to be more innovative, we need to revive innovation and build some strong innovation performance. So the management commitment is strong, verbally at least. When it comes to action, questionable. But based on this initial commitment and statement, the organizations start to build the engagement and starting to put the bits and pieces in place, building the innovation capabilities and the innovation management capabilities. But this is a very difficult discipline, and there is a lot of new things to learn. People are not used to work in an uncertain environment, and it takes time. And often we see that it takes a bit too much time, and management has maybe underestimated the time it takes to build strong innovation performance. So there's an impatient and the results are not showing. And of course, management is looking elsewhere. Maybe we should go back and focus on efficiency and productivity instead. It's much more predictable, and we will see the short-term gains from that. And sometimes, and maybe in many cases, they're turning their back on the innovation efforts, which means that the organizational engagement will fade away before we can see any substantial innovation performance. So that's one of the main issues, that we are not patient enough. We don't understand what it takes, underestimate the time and the resources and the competence for doing this properly that it requires. And then to add to it, after a few years down the line, we see it repeat itself. And we've seen this over and over again in many types of organizations, that innovation efforts fade away and then they start again, and it becomes cyclic. Sometimes it's 2 or 3 years, sometimes it's 5 or 6 years, but typically that's the cycle. So it's out of sync and it's cyclic. The second issue is that when we do our investments in innovation efforts, we do it in a fragmented way. We tend to lean towards more kind of silver bullet solutions, and lean more towards methods and tools than building a complete system. Typically, we start to build competence and initiate activities such as an idea competition. Maybe we're setting up an idea management system. We're running design thinking, lean startup initiatives, and so forth. We've seen them coming and going. But these are, in all their power, they're scattered, and they're just methods and tools, and they're not kept together in a systemic and systematic way. The third issue that we face is that it's not strategic enough. There's a lot of talk on a strategic level, but very little strategic action. So there's a lack of a strategic direction for innovation and its management. And this is something that we're going to talk a bit more about when we dig into the principles. But in short, it means that we need to envision the value that innovation should bring to the different stakeholders in our value chain. And based on that, we need to frame the opportunity and actually create a strong focus and set the right ambition level. And based on that, we need to shape the right approaches, which means forming the processes and providing the right resources. And finally, we need to secure a governance to be able to follow up, measure, and improve. Now, to get this, to deal with these issues and have the possibility to increase the innovation performance, over the past 10 years, we have been part of developing an international standard for innovation management. It's called ISO 56000, and it was published 2 years ago. So it's fresh, and it sits alongside with ISO 9000 and so forth. Now, some of you might say, this is crazy. An international effort over 10 years, over 50 companies involved in doing something that must be counterproductive and not go well with innovation. But you have to remember, it's not innovation that we are standardizing. That would kind of the result and the way of innovating. That would not serve the purpose well. It's the management of innovation that you can have a guidance standard for. And you can view it as a checklist. If we have certain bits and pieces in place, we increase the probability for being successful in our innovation endeavors. Now, one of the starting points in forming this standard was to define a set of innovation management principles. And it started out with a long list of principles, ended up with 8 major principles. These principles are sufficient enough to define the discipline of innovation management. You need no more and no less. And today we're going to take a look at these principles. Each one of them deserves a session in itself. They're very comprehensive topics, but we'll give a brief overview and we'll dive into some of them. First one is realizing value. Innovation, the purpose of innovation is to realize new and novel values. Exploiting insights, you need to understand where the opportunities are and what kind of values you would like to create. Now, since we're dealing with new things, we need to be able to manage uncertainty effectively. And of course, to be able to manage uncertainty and live with uncertainty, we need to have a strong culture, a culture promoting innovation activities. And to have a strong culture, we need to have future-focused leaders with a strategic direction. And then, since we're dealing with uncertainty, we also need to be adaptable. And finally, we need to have a systems approach to things. So let's have a look at some of these key principles. And I would like to start from the beginning with realization of value. It's a basic principle. Maybe you take it for granted, but I can say that in most organizations that we have been involved with, and we're talking about thousands of management teams over the past 20 years, no one have actually had a common shared definition of what innovation is and what it should do for the organization and its stakeholders. So these principles, in short, tells us that value is realized from adopting and having an impact on new solutions. And it also tells us that we need to focus on value for the interested parties, the stakeholders, from the very beginning in our innovation efforts. And that value can be both financial and non-financial. And one of the key things in developing the standard was actually to agree on a definition of innovation. Something that most organizations lack. They don't have a vision, a lot of talk about innovation, but they don't have the definition. And according to ISO, innovation is a new or changed entity realizing or redistributing value. And there are two key things here, new and value. And to say that we have an innovation, we need to be able to demonstrate a value creation. And redistributing, yes, redistributing is, there is a value, but it's being redistributed in a value chain. Maybe a new player takes a valuable position in a value chain and creating or redistributing value from that position. The second thing we need to look at is entity. An entity could be anything. It could be a product, a service, a process, a model, or a method. And of course, value can be created in many different ways, from pursuing opportunities such as delighting your users and customers, achieving financial performance for your organization, building an attractive brand, making your employees maybe more happy and engaged, achieving efficient operations, and contributing to a sustainable society. Now, in terms of the difference between different value-adding activities that we pursue, for example, improvement and innovation, what is really the difference if they are all aiming towards creating new values? Well, the difference is the degree of change. When it comes to improvement, we are relying on predictable outcomes, mainly static processes, and the core competencies that we possess. When it comes to innovation, we're moving away from the certainty. There are uncertain outcomes. We need to use dynamic processes, and we need to introduce new competencies. And in the field of life science, there's also a strong element of research, and research is seen to be a subset of innovation, providing new knowledge into the innovation processes. And speaking about innovation and the relation to innovation, the research and the relation to innovation. This is an interesting observation from a quite ambitious study looking at 10,000 relationships between R&D spendings and financial performance. And the interesting observation is that there's no statistical relationship between how much you spend on research and your financial performance. And financial performance in terms of sales growth or operational margin or total shareholder value. So why is that? We're spending a lot of money on research, but there's no connection to financial performance. In the same study, they made the connection and they added two elements that need to be in place to make sure that you can utilize your resources in terms of research in the best way and achieve financial performance. You need to couple research and research spendings with a strong innovation strategy and a culture and structure that supports innovation, that innovation strategy. If you have that, you can see the connection and you can achieve a higher financial performance. So that's the first principle of realization of value. Focus on value from the beginning, having a definition, making sure that you can make a distinction between innovation and other value-adding activities, and also making sure that you have the right conditions for utilizing the resources, funds, human resources, and infrastructure and so forth in the most optimal way. The second principle I would like to talk about is exploiting insights. This is where innovation really sparks and begins. So this principle talks about systematically building knowledge that unlocks opportunities. And these opportunities could be to serve stated or unstated needs for example, customers or other interested parties. And that you on a regular basis need to explore internal and external sources of information and data to learn. So insights is the goal of innovation efforts. This is where we understand our context, the external, internal context, and this is where we understand where the future needs will be and where we need to aim our innovation efforts. To develop insights, you need to study your surrounding, the external and the internal context from different perspectives. And these are just a few of the perspectives that we use when we work with our clients. So, of course, customer user needs is extremely important. That's a really important topic with a lot of different methods and tools that you can use. Orthodoxies is a different one that we'll talk a bit more about, which is really important but often forgotten. Doing the technologies scannings, understanding emerging technologies, emerging competencies, finding out about new business models, understanding global and local trends and the discontinuities. Studying analogies, different industries, distant industries, and maybe even Mother Nature sometimes to get inspiration and learn from that. And of course, you need to study your competitors as well. Most of things on this list is obvious to you, but this one might be a bit surprising. What do we mean by orthodoxies? Let me give you a very simple example. This goes back to a project we did with a chocolate maker a few years back. And they were faced with heavy competition from different brands and, of course, new products on the shelves. And they needed to find new ways of dealing with that threat, new products, new ways of marketing, new ways of displaying their products. And one thing we did in an early stage in this project was to say, well, have you studied your own product lately? So if you take your product, open the packaging as it's being described, what do you see? And the team was puzzled. And of course, you don't have to think long before you say, well, we're displaying the backside of the product. Why have we done this for decades over decades? We haven't even thought about it. This is a very simple example, but this is what orthodoxy is all about. Studying mainly your own business, your assumptions, your fixedness, your ways of doing things, and questioning that in a systematic manner. So that's one way of finding out new things, learning new things, not only about the environment outside your organization, but also inside the organization. So insights are key, and they are more important than ideas. Many organizations are very much idea focused, and I would say that focusing too much on ideas and your starting point would be ideas is a bad idea. The third principle I would like to talk about is managing uncertainty. This principle really puts kind of the spotlight on what makes innovation management different from other management disciplines. We are working under uncertainties, and we need to deal with that. So this principle tells us that innovating means managing uncertainties and risks all the time. And we need to systematically experiment and try out our hypothesis. And you also need to not only experiment, but you need to have a balanced portfolio of opportunities that you are pursuing. Innovation means moving from an intent to create something new to create value. And there are certain steps involved with that. This is on a very high level. And in the beginning, there are a lot of uncertainties. Main things we are basing our decisions on and our work on are assumptions. And gradually, we're transforming these assumptions into knowledge. And the main tool we have for that is experimentation. Identifying assumptions and uncertainties, building hypotheses, and testing those hypotheses through experiments. And you might read tons of management books on this, or you can take a training program, but there's nothing more learning than what we see SpaceX doing right now in front of us with their Starship development. A lot of uncertainties, a lot of assumptions. For example, can we reuse a rocket? Can we skydive a rocket? Can we do a flip maneuver? Can we build a spaceship from stainless steel? A lot of different assumptions that they need to test and verify. And it's done in the following way.
Five, 4, 3, 2, 1.
We have sound, by the way.
Plus 30 seconds, all 3 Raptor engines at power. Starship climbing to 10-kilometer altitude. View on the right shows 3 Raptor engines burning. Everything continues to look nominal. 4.5 minutes, we are handing off to the LOX tank. We are beginning to flip to horizontal. And the white cloud, the plume you were seeing was intentional. There is a liquid oxygen dump. We've now transitioned to horizontal and beginning the subsonic test portion of the flight, where we check out the aft and the forward flaps to hold the vehicle stability as we descend back to the landing pad.
So now test flying a vehicle, a minimal viable product, trying to understand if their assumptions are right or if we have to scar them. Systematically going through every major uncertainty, formulating hypotheses.
6 minutes, 10 seconds into flight, we're down beneath 1.5 kilometers. We're preparing to restart 2 engines, flip the vehicle vertical, then transition to 1 engine for the landing burn.
not succeeding every time, but you're learning. So listen to what is being said from the control tower now.
As you can see from the scene, we had again another great flight up to the 10-kilometer apogee. We demonstrated the ability to transition the engines to the landing propellant tanks. The subsonic reentry looked very good and stable like we saw again last December, so we've got a lot of good data on flap control. And again, we've just got to work on that landing a little bit, but we'll find out from the team as they go through the data. We were in contact with telemetry all the way down.
So this is a spectacular and something that is happening in front of our eyes. They're broadcasting it. If you want to learn about experimentation, formulating hypotheses, follow SpaceX and their Starship development. And the 15th prototype they actually managed to put on the ground in one piece. And they have a range of different prototypes testing different assumptions and hypotheses lined up. And the next step is to make it orbital and to send it out in an orbit around the Earth. So this is really something I recommend you to follow and study. The next one is strategic direction. And I know culture and future focus leaders are so important, but we can't cover them this time. That we'll have to wait until next time. The strategic direction is maybe the main tool we have as leaders to make sure that we can focus on the right opportunities and put the right resources and competencies in place. So this principle tells us that you have to have a shared innovation vision and objectives. And we need to have a clear focus with relevant ambition levels. It's not open for everyone. It's not every flower should bloom. We need to have a strong focus, and then we need to put the right resources in place and form and outline the most effective approaches. So an innovation strategy should cover 4 different things. In the strategy, we need to do a bit of innovation. We need to envision what values we would like to achieve and deliver in the future. So vision and clear objectives for your innovation endeavors. Then we need to frame the opportunities that are aiming us towards that vision. So strong focus is actually promoting innovation. It's not hindering innovation. And we also need to set the ambition level to understand what risks we are willing to take. And based on that, we need to form the approaches. We need to understand what processes to use and what resources to put in place. And of course, we need to secure governance and make sure that we can follow up on our innovation efforts. So I just want to give you a hint of what we mean by setting the focus and what implications that have. When we find out about our external and internal context, we can start identifying the opportunities. And there might be core opportunities, very close to the core business. There might be adjacent opportunities stretching the core. There might be distant and there might be remote. And the further we get away from the core business, of course, the uncertainties will increase. And this is a specifically important topic to set a strategy and to identify the focus for your innovation efforts is specifically important in the life science sector, because we have something kind of hovering over us, the regulation ghost. And we need to be able to understand if we are to comply or challenge regulations in our innovation efforts. So we need to be able to navigate and find ways of dealing with the regulations and finding the areas, the sweet spots for us to invest in. The second thing I would like to point out when it comes to innovation strategy is that we need to have a broad view of what is possible to innovate. So this is from an ambitious study going back a few years where we're looking at the investments in innovation and where companies across different sectors over a 10-year period have put their money when it comes to renewal and innovation. And as you can see, most money has gone into product and product performance and product system. But if we look at the rate of return, it's a completely different story. The rate of return tells us that it's difficult to do product performance, to increase product performance through innovation. It's difficult to build a new product system. Something we need to do, we can't forget innovating in that area, the offering, of course, because then we will be irrelevant over time. But there are so many different opportunities outside, both to the left and to the right, in terms of the configuration of our business and the experience that we provide our customers. So that is principle, the strategic direction, and this takes us to the end of my presentation today. We've talked about some of the key principles, innovation management principles, that enables you to sustain your innovation efforts and increase the chances for breakthrough and success. Realization of value, exploiting insights, managing uncertainties, building a culture driven by future-focused leaders, pointing out the strategic direction, being adaptable, and finally having a systems approach and keeping it all together in an innovation management system, which you can read more about in the innovation management standard ISO 56000. It tells you everything about the system and the different components and elements of that. So by that, I would like to say thank you, and from the Amplify team, say that innovation is a very difficult discipline. That's why we see so much failures and dissatisfaction with the investments you're doing in innovation management. But it's the most powerful tool we have to drive change for the better and achieving a sustainable future. I will be part of the panel discussion later on this afternoon, and if you like to give me a few questions, you can post them on the chat in the event, on the event page. Thank you so much. My time is out. Over to you, Rian.